Hello, everyone, and welcome to Parking in Motion podcast. Really excited for this week's guest, Dean Holmes from Helm Commercial Management. We're going to be talking about commercial management and the interaction between technology in the parking operation. But before we get started, Dean, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
So, Dean Holmes, I've been in the industry for 14 years now. Started off in the UK working for Manchester Airport Group. Moved on to working with Aero Parker for a number of years, helped them grow into the US market, helped them develop their revenue management services. And 3 years ago now, I made the decision to set up my own business, Helm Commercial. For the last 3 years, we've been working with LAX, Charlotte. We've got a number of US airports using our digital marketing services, and we've most recently pivoted to work with some private parking operators as well. So all about the parking.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always like to ask this question. So what got you into parking, Dean?
So I was actually an accountant. I'd just qualified. I was looking for a more commercial role, and I saw a job at London Stansted Airport. It was actually dual focused. It was supposed to be retail and parking. And honestly, my view going in was, I'm going to ditch parking as soon as I can and get involved in something else. Within weeks, I'd almost exhausted what I could actually do in terms of adding value from a retail perspective. And then parking just sucked me in. That was 14 years ago.
It tends to do that, right? We all have really kind of a funny backstory of how we found parking, and here we are. I haven't been in it as quite as long as you have, but definitely enjoy it. It sucks you in, and you just become part of the parking universe, which is really exciting. So you and I have known each other about 7 years now.
7 years, mate.
Yeah, it's a long time, right?
And you've still invited me back.
There you go. Well, we've been professional colleagues, but we've also just built a friendship on a personal level, but also a professional level of how we kind of see both commercial management and technology and how that looks. So, kind of jumping off and getting into this conversation, Dean and I have had quite a few conversations off camera prior to today about a kind of a professional services approach to data and technology, and how ultimately that comes together. You have to have the right team in place, and those team dynamics, and how critical that is, whether it's the client, the operator, or the technology partners, all working together. It's one of the hallmarks of what Designa really believes in, is that triple win theory, and making sure that the guest experience and ultimately the operations is the focus of all three of those. And when I say operational success, 9 times out of 10, we're talking about revenue generation, but none of that can exist, which you and I both believe, without that commercial management strategy and taking that client on that journey. So walk us through that your thought process on that.
Yeah, so from my perspective, we often work with airports who are adopting a strategy for the very first time. So in terms of taking them on a journey, it's not about throwing the kitchen sink at them on day one. It's about growing the services. So what we talk about there is, we launch the reservation system to begin with. We then allocate a small amount of spaces to pre-booking. That means that we can bring in digital marketing. Once we get the marketing piece, we can bring the traffic to the site. Once we bring the traffic to the site, we can start working on conversion rate optimization techniques like dynamic pricing. Then you prove the concept not only to your airport stakeholders, but also their bosses and the government agencies themselves, which is really important. And I'm so glad you brought up the point about the journey, because the reality is, you need to start small. You need to prove the concept, and you need to grow, and you need to grow, and you need to grow. And the reality is, the more traffic you drive to your site and the more reservations you take, you will effectively cannibalize that drive-up market. So there is a loss in drive-up revenue, but it's more than offset with the pre-booking gains. That's either improved exits per passenger, that's a longer length of stay, or that's just a higher ATV generally, despite the reductions versus drive-up. Now, it's almost counterintuitive trying to take an airport personnel, a person who works for a government agency, and telling them that you're going to reduce the rates. but you're going to bring more people in and you're going to more than offset that revenue loss.
Right.
They don't believe that from day one.
Right.
Certain clients have. LAX and Charlotte, they've been fantastic. They've embraced this from the beginning. But more often than not, you need to start slow and you need to take them on that journey.
Yeah.
And I think the journey as well, it's not just about the results, it's not about the financial performance improvements. It's about building that team spirit.
Right.
Because when we worked at LAX together, we had some great conversations. We didn't always agree with one another.
Nope.
But I tell you what, we talked it through. You, me, the client, everybody was open
Right.
and invited to get involved in a discussion.
Yeah, well, our decisions changed everything, right? The operation, ultimately the revenue management, how the car parks, but ultimately is really that guest journey changed too dramatically, right? Not just that client journey, but the guest journey dramatically changes. And we had to implement those changes slowly to educate the client, right? Those are some tough days as you're implementing a system like this, right? You can't throw the kitchen sink at it. You can't go from 0 to 100% pre-book overnight. It just isn't possible.
Absolutely not. Even if you did, you took a huge marketing budget and invested it on day one, you still need to change that customer behaviour.
Yeah.
A big part of it is raising awareness
100%.
of the availability of reservations, the availability of the different products, and most importantly, the fact that there are discounts available if you book well in advance.
Yeah.
Every customer's willingness to pay is different. Yours is different to mine.
100%.
Mine is different to Annalisa's. It's all different. And you need to tap into that and you need to test it. Get the price points live. Look at the revenue generation and build and build and build.
Yeah, I think that relationship you have with the guest too, right? So when I travel and I'm by myself, like one bagger, right? I'm flying through the airport. I might be looking for a different parking product than I have 5 kids, as you know, right? So Brett, when he's traveling as the business Brett, is very different than the family Brett, right? So I need a completely different product. I'm looking for something very different in that guest journey, and you have to bring. Really, you talked about guest awareness, but it's really education. It takes time to educate that client base.
Yeah. Do you know what? You touched upon having a suite of products as well.
Yep.
That's really important because you need different price points, different product types, so you can appeal to a broader audience.
Yeah, that was one of our biggest learning lessons we had at LAX. Remember when we first started, they had two products?
2 products.
And now 11, 12, how many do they have today?
Oh, they have a lot. And if you look at the individual locations themselves, so when we do the forecasting models, we're forecasting for 51 products at LAX, and that's because you've got your valet, you've got your premium, you've got your EV, all in your CTA general. You've got your standards general lots. We now have budget, park and economy. We have a whole host of products, and it's important,
right?
Because the reality is every customer is different, and when you decide how you're going to travel to and from the airport, there's probably 3 main considerations: cost, security and convenience.
Yeah.
Only 3.
Yeah, there really is a product for everyone, right? So when you have that product spread, you're really maximizing the value of the asset. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah, and you've got to maintain space in all of your product types up until the day of arrival. Whether you're booking 3 minutes in advance or 3 months in advance, the reality is you want to be able to offer them a valet, a premium, a general and an economy.
Yeah, what you just touched on a really big learning lesson that we had. I remember working together was opening up reservations for less than 24 hours and reservations in real time, even up into including in the lane, right? So walk us through kind of that learning lesson from a commercial management perspective, and what you think the pros and the cons are.
So what we've always found with most parking organisations or airports where parking is a big revenue generator, operations is something they are used to, they are familiar with, and they've got operators who will push back on, maybe bringing too many vehicles to the site or not having enough time to plan. But the reality is we take up to 40% of our bookings on the same day.
Yeah.
When we first go to airports, they all want to put a 6-hour lead time restriction on.
Right.
Every single one of them without fail. But before long, there'll be a challenge on pre-booking. We'll come up with a number of suggestions. Making reservations in real time is the one that is usually the last they work on. but it's the most impactful.
It's definitely one of the most impactful, right?
25 to 40% of your total bookings on the day of arrival, and you're switching them off.
It's funny because, parking's so important for, it's the beginning and end of every journey, but for the guest, it's really the last thing they think about, right? They think about, I need parking. And it's usually, sometimes it's that day of or even en route, right? So we're seeing that all the way through.
It's a grudge purchase, ultimately.
Yeah.
If you could make parking free, everyone would be happy, I'm sure. Not me, but most people.
Yeah. Well, then there'd be no availability, right? So people ultimately pay convenience. They're going to pay for the product that fits their persona. We kind of talk through that. So walk me through some other learning lessons. I kind of want to go back to that team dynamic. I think that's so important to make sure that the team is learning and growing together. And you kind of touched on it a little bit. We didn't always agree on the solutions. We did a lot of A/B testing, a little testing to make sure that we're maximizing, again, the value even down to a space level or quota level by product. So walk us through that a little bit.
So I suppose first and foremost, within a pragmatic team, what you need are people from all walks of life with different experiences, different agendas, different ideas on how to do things. And when you have that discussion-based approach and a commercial lead like my company comes in, makes a number of suggestions, we want to hear feedback. Because the reality is what we've done in one location isn't always going to fit in another. Now, more often than not, the overarching approach is pretty similar.
Right.
But once you have that overarching approach, you need to increasingly test, and you need to move things around. You need to try different initiatives at different airports. So I'll give you a good example. So at Charlotte, we've got a number of products similar to LAX. We did have the same online booking system provider for a very long time. And that booking system provider offered upgrades post-sale and inflow. We tried both on a number of locations. Some airports loved the inflow upgrades. The uptake was fantastic. Other airports, nobody give one. They didn't care. But then the post-sale did work. So I think it's important to have a whole host of different initiatives that do work. So let's say you have a particular problem. It's important to understand what levers you can pull to address that problem.
Right.
Now, there might be 10 different levers. One of them is going to work on your location, but you have to test it.
You have to test.
I would love to say that I know what works and what doesn't.
Right.
But the reality is, every time I work with a new client, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic, because it keeps you on your toes.
Right.
And it does mean that those companies out there who've maybe done well in one market, they can't simply go to another market, take that approach, replicate it, and move forward.
Right.
And that's great, because it keeps everyone on the toes. It keeps myself, my company, my competitors, all on our toes, all working hard, all striving to be better. And my view is, as soon as you stop striving and you stop trying to make yourself better and improve what you give to your clients, you may as well give it up.
Yeah, there's a lot of services out there that offer kind of what we put together, but they offer it as kind of like it's an automated tool. You and I both know that's not the reality of the situation, right?
There aren't enough markets. If you think from a parking perspective, we've got pre-book and drive up first and foremost. We've got 365 arrival dates in any given year. We've got customers staying for 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 20 days.
Yes.
You're talking about thousands of individual markets, and the customer's willingness to pay is different in every single one.
Every single one.
It's different for every single airport. The drive up rate is different at every airport. Some are too low, some are too high. It's very rare to get it right.
Yeah, and they're unwilling. I think that's always difficult. And airports have a hard time with this, right? They have to go through and create pricing, and usually it sticks for years. And that's one thing that I think we learned is helping an airport work through that pricing model, right? So we have some flexibility.
And we agreed a framework in advance. If you remember, when we first started LAX, it wasn't a case of, we're great, you can trust us to optimize your rates. No problem. We went to them, we showed them analysis from other airports, we did our research on the off-airport market, we brought together some rates from your TNCs, your Uber, your Lyfts, and then we looked at each individual market, We agreed 7 different seasonal bands.
Yep.
We had different rates, different rules for every single product. You know, and that was important because we could put something in front of the nose of the client and say, we will never go above the drive-up rate,
Right.
and we will never exceed, let's say, a 50% discount versus drive-up.
Right.
So that meant that we had the freedom and the autonomy to change rates between those bands.
Yeah, the left and right. There's guards, right?
And it meant that the airport themselves, they knew that we couldn't go out and start charging a couple of dollars for parking.
Right.
They'd agreed the rate, they'd agreed the framework.
Right.
So they had confidence in what we did from day one. And then going back to the team, we built that confidence further.
Yeah.
Because we had regular ongoing conversations where we debated everything.
Everything. Yeah. I think one of the things that really has always struck me very different with Helm and Dean, what you do with your team and Faisal and everybody is working through the different forecasts, right? So walk me through a little bit. You have the 12-month forecast. You break it down at the beginning of the year, a 2 + 10. It can be a 4 + 8, 6 + 6, and it kind of goes through. Walk us through that approach and what you're ultimately achieving for the client with that type of approach.
Yeah, so it's all about setting the expectation. Setting the expectations for the client at the beginning of the financial year.
Yep.
They agree to the assumptions first and foremost. Once they agree to the assumptions, they buy into that forecast. Once they've bought into that forecast, it means that as well as us, they are fully focused on helping us achieve that.
Yeah.
They've taken ownership.
Yep.
And they're bought in the sense that they agree with the assumptions in advance.
Right.
So there is no grey areas beyond that.
But we're relentless in our progress, right? So we're not just setting it and forgetting it. It's not a model set and forget it, right? We're pushing through.
I mean, really, the financial planning process is mainly about setting expectations at the beginning of the financial year. But then when we regularly reforecast throughout the year, and we either do it every quarter or we'll do it after. We've got 5 months of actuals, 7 months of actuals, and 10 months of actuals. It's entirely dependent on the finance function.
Right.
We've always found you keep finance happy.
Everyone's happy, yeah.
Most people are happy.
Most people.
I won't say everyone, but most.
Yeah.
But I think if you do that, what you can start to do is identify those risks and opportunities throughout the financial year.
Yeah.
So nobody wants to work with a partner who sets a forecast and then you've got 2 weeks to go and say, oh yeah, by the way, we're 10 million lower than where we said we'd be.
Yeah.
You want to work with companies who are telling you that in advance, who are looking forward, seeing what the next few months are going to bring.
Yep.
Is there a challenge? Is there an opportunity? And understand, especially from a challenge perspective, I want to know well in advance if, let's say, July or August is looking tricky at one of my clients. So I want to know now so I can pivot the strategy.
Yep.
I can work with them. I can secure more marketing funds if needs be. You can bring another bit of tech in. Whatever it may be,
Right.
You need to understand that there's a problem before you can even consider solving that problem.
Yeah.
And that's what the financial planning process does for everyone.
Yeah, relentless progress. We had a lot of lessons too in the troughs and the peaks, right? So we learned a lot that there was opportunity to fill up the troughs.
Yep.
In the low and mid peak periods. We also learned there's a period you have to go drive the revenue at those peak periods. So walk us through that a little bit.
So in terms of the seasonal impacts,
Yep.
we look at many seasonal bands, and what you will ultimately have is a similar approach for each individual one. The main difference is the average discount versus drive up is obviously much lower. Yep. When the demand for parking exceeds the supply of spaces.
Yep.
And it's much higher when the demand for parking is much lower than the supply of spaces. Because when it is lower, you are then competing with off airports, with TNCs, with third-party aggregators who are aggressively selling every single off airport operator.
Right.
The reality is, off airports, despite doing very little of their own channel marketing, they simply give a commission to your APRs, your way.coms, your cheap airport parkings of the world. And they know in exchange for a 10, 20, 30% commission that those companies are investing millions and millions of dollars every single year in marketing. So they're getting eyeballs on their products. They're raising awareness. They have an opportunity to sell. What do airports have? It's minimal.
Yeah.
You know, and even those that bring in an online booking system, how many of them hand on heart can say they are investing the right amount of money into marketing?
No, and look, that took us a lot of time, and I don't think you ever get it right, but you take learning lesson after learning lesson year over year, and you talked about your playbook earlier, right?
Yeah.
So walk us through how you take those learning lessons and you achieve those results, seasonal, but year over year.
Yeah. So I'm always working with my revenue manager, and he's coming to me every single day with a hypothesis, and it might be, I want to change the 2-day rate for the price entry point. I want to increase it. I want to reduce the price differential between that and the next product.
Yep.
And he might say it's going to drive upgrade to a higher product, and it's going to drive the overall ATV. So we agree it, we discuss it, we formalise it, we agree what dates it will be applicable for.
Yep.
As soon as that test period is over, we track our results.
Yep.
And what we never look at those results, even if it's a runaway success. We never look at it and say, right, that's great, we're going to rest on our laurels now.
No.
That one's done. It's again, well, how do we increase that little bit more? How do we get
what did we
that
learn from that? What
additional-
else can we do, right? Yeah.
Those learnings here, can we apply them to somewhere else?
Yes.
Those learnings that we've taken here, how do we make that better?
Right.
How do we grow next year? Because the reality is, your pre-book revenue has to grow every single year.
Yep.
Because ultimately, you will cannibalise the drive up customers who were staying previously. So
Yeah, let's talk about that for a little bit, right? We're seeing this pre-book, and some airports have been incredibly successful, right? We're seeing it up around 60%, right?
Yeah.
And then there's conversations now. We are having the conversation that some airports are even considering in the future, not today, but in the future, going 100% pre-book. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So that landscape's going to look very different.
Absolutely. And you know, the big driver behind that is the revenue success they've seen from reservations today. But then it's also around the size of the email marketing list.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to see more from organisations is using that parking email marketing list, using it for parking, get those sales in first and foremost.
Right.
Very important. But you've got a picture of your customer, and it's incomplete right now.
Right.
Could they be back? Could they purchase something else through the airport?
Right.
Could they purchase something at their destination? All of a sudden, you've got the starting point for some customer relationship management, which is actually meaningful.
Yeah,
and
I
that's
think,
where I want to see it move.
Yeah, we've got to connect the parking with the rest of the journey and think about that lifetime value of a customer. I think that's true commercial management. That's one thing that you and I have always discussed. Within parking, we have revenue management to total commercial management. You're also managing, and you kind of touched on it briefly, and I believe marketing and advertising are two different functions, right? So we've kind of talked through that, is it needs to touch all aspects of that and ultimately build that profile of that customer and and what products we can offer them in the future and improve the guest experience, because they're going to end up spending more money.
Yeah, bring that repeat purchase, get that lifetime value, sell them something else.
Yeah.
You know, that's what all of the tech companies today, they're interested in, as well as the revenue they generate from their systems. They want to know that they've got eyeballs on their solution, on their technology. When they come to sell their business, sell their technology, whatever it may be, the first question somebody asks is, how many people are looking at your system every single year?
Yeah.
In most cases, it's minimal.
It's minimal.
But if you start reaching far and wide, you do more than just airports. You work with off airports, you work with other parking verticals, you work with lounges, other travel products.
Yep.
All of a sudden, you're getting to a place where you have a marketplace that can deliver value and a great customer experience for every single person who comes in. Because you're different to I am.
Yep.
Annalisa's different to us.
Yep.
We're all very different, and our travel needs are different. So let's tap into that.
Yeah, we absolutely need to tap into that. You know, before we wrap up, we've been working in the airport space, but a lot of our conversations really over the last 6 months, Dean, and off camera prior to this, was talking about kind of the learning lessons we had in the airport space and where the rest of the parking industry is going. So as we close up here, kind of walk me through where your vision, where you see parking is going as an industry, and kind of learning lessons we've had from the airport space into the other verticals.
So I think if I start with airports, I think first and foremost, airports are finally starting to install online booking systems.
Yep.
That's a great starting point. It's very much a starting point.
A starting point.
You know, they then need to start securing investment into parking, marketing. They need to invest into your Google channels. They need to bring more traffic to their website.
Yep.
Once they have people on the website looking at their products, looking at their prices, you can start to assess the conversion rate.
Right.
Is it working? Is it not? So I think for airports, they're moving in a positive direction.
Right.
But there's a hell of a lot more to go.
Right.
There's an awful lot more. Then when you think of the other modes of transport, because let's face it, if you can use off airports, you've got fantastic exposure
Right.
and marketing channels. For them, they're a little more aggressive already. They are investing. They are using third-party aggregators.
Right.
They're getting a number of people to their site every single day. For me, what they're going to start looking at is, where do I get a new location from? What system can I employ today that is going to give me that incremental gain on my conversion rate
Right.
and eke out that little more value? What can I add? Can I work with a lounge provider?
Right.
Can I put lounge on the third step of the journey and take a small commission for doing that? Not only are they making more money, but they're also starting to improve the guest experience
100%.
on their website.
Yep.
And that's what you're starting to see.
Yeah.
And I think as more and more online booking systems enter this market, as more and more of them develop their functionality, they can start to drive a lot more value, both commercially, but most importantly, drive that customer experience.
Yeah, it's really exciting, right? Again, go back and as we kind of close up, it's really a professional services approach to data and technology, right?
Yeah.
To improve the revenue, to drive that guest experience, and how do we work together as a team to ultimately solve that problem for our clients?
Absolutely, and all teams need to work together.
Yeah.
Everyone should have a voice. Everyone should be ready and willing to go to battle for their point.
Yeah, you got to challenge each other,
you
right?
have
And learn and grow together, right?
It's important.
Yeah.
But if you are going to challenge another member of your team, you need to make sure that those team dynamics are correct and that you employ the people with the right mindset.
Yeah, I think it comes from top-down leadership, but you also have to get the feedback from the team and make sure that they have a voice, right? It's absolutely critical.
Yeah, and when me and you worked together, we were both pretty vocal.
Yep.
So we were aware that we could dominate a meeting.
Yeah.
So we would deliberately bring it back, and we would bring other voices in.
Yeah.
And what happened over time was everyone become more confident. The client was more confident. The client was ultimately happy that they saw a whole host of different experts in different fields battling it out every single week, having really good discussions. That's important. It's the only way you grow.
It's the only way you grow.
By challenging one another.
Yeah, it's not a set and forget it business. And Dean, I couldn't be more excited to have you come here today. I think the people out listening, I hope that you reach out to either Designa or Dean. We'll make sure that you're in the link to Helm Commercials in the comments. We appreciate you coming. This is just the beginning, right? Where we're evolving and where this is going in commercial management. And
we'll do another in 12 months.
There we go.
And then we'll see what we're talking about then.
Yeah, perfect. Dean, thank you for showing up. Everyone out there, thank you for your time. Another episode of Parking in Motion. Thank you.
Thank you.